Welcome to Focus on Why, the podcast where reflection sparks action. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and together we'll explore compelling stories, profound insights, and transformative experiences from inspiring guests worldwide. Feeling lost or unfulfilled? Searching for clarity, purpose, or meaning in your work and life? This podcast invites you on a journey of self-discovery to align your work with your values, shape your future with intention, and create a purposeful way of life. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, have you signed up to receive my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus? Every Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Shelly Starks. Hello, Shelly.
Hi, Amy. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Well, thank you goes to Freeman Beals for introducing us. It's always great to have a recommendation. And since then, actually, you've passed on recommendations for me to meet other people. So the cycle continues. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And thank you, Freeman.
So what is it, Shelly, that you're focusing on at the moment?
Well, in 2024, it was kind of like a sleepy year for me. I was building, but it was kind of like doing a lot of internal work and then also working on my business kind of internally before turning it out to 2025. I think this year is really going to be more of an action year, which is exciting for my business. And, last year I did quite a few podcasts and we've got a lot of content. So it's exciting to, kind of look forward to what's coming this year in terms of continuing to grow my business and continuing the connections that I love to make, like you mentioned.
And tell me, what is it that you're doing in your business, or what is it you're working on with your business?
So I actually am a communications coach. I have been behavioral analysis certified for over 20 years. I work typically with teams and a lot of times with leadership teams at organizations to help them understand how to communicate better with their people. One of the challenges that I see, especially after COVID and a lot of remote work, is that we're, treating everybody the same across the board, and individuals are individual. And so it's important that we meet them where they are in the way that they communicate, problem solve, and make decisions. And so I am continuing that work to work with individuals and specifically with leaders to help them better communicate.
Critical work, absolutely. Essential work, one would say. And what you were just saying there about the way that we are treating people in the same way and that we should be meeting them where they are. Tell me a bit more about what that looks like for us.
Yeah. So when we have a communication style, a behavioral style, again, it's how we communicate, problem solve, and make decisions. It's like a language to us. And so when we have, let's say I'm one style and you're another style, and I'm communicating to you in my style, I am not communicating in a language that really resonates with you. And so when it might be the same language, but it's not really connecting us in a way that conversation can be built stronger or even more productive. And so unfortunately, when we do that, we're causing the other person to go into a fight or flight mode. So it's in the back of their brain. That is just when we have the ability to just do the exact task that is in front of us. If we allow that conversation to open up a little more and we communicate in their style where they feel like they're heard and understood, they tend to go to the frontal lobe, which is the reasoning part of their brain. And when that happens, we have more creativity, we have more individuality, we have more things that come from that where they're able to put their stamp on whatever the conversation is. And you're just going to have a more productive, a higher emotional intelligence level in that conversation. And everyone wins. It elevates the conversation across the board.
So if we're meeting people where they are, how do we stay authentic to who we are?
It's a really good question. So I use a tool called extended disc, not just disc, because there's several, but extended in this form means when you're extending yourself into another style in order to be most effective, or you think to be most effective, the idea is that you meet those people there in small increments of time. So it's not meant to be extending you for long periods of time. When you extend yourself for long periods of time, or you believe that you needed to be in another style in order to be most effective, you tend to drain your energy tank. And you don't want to stay there very long, but we want to be able to go in and out of that and be conscious of what our energy tank needs in order to refill it, so that when we go to debit something out of our energy tank, energy wise, that we have enough in there to debit, and we're not going into a deficit, which causes us to go into burnout. So when you have that ability to kind of go in and out in that conversation, you're meeting them where they are, but you're there for a small amount of time, and then you come back into your authentic side of who you are. So again, it's just not meant to be extended, but it's, or not long periods of time, but you can extend yourself for short periods of time as long as you're rebuilding that, or refilling that energy tank and not depleting it past empty.
Now, Shelley, you mentioned that you have been working in this field for 30 years. Now, communication is something that's been developed over millennia. How have the last 30 years evolved in terms of all evolution?
So I've been working in this for 20 years. So I just want to make sure I mention that. But more importantly, I think that what the old way of thinking is the way I look at it. It was very dictator like. It's more of a manager versus a leader, and I think that a lot of coaches out there are starting to lean more towards, when you lead with specific tools and you lead being an authentic leader, but also meeting them where they are, you just have a better, you elevate the team to a different level. When I was younger and I was coming up in the business world. Most of my leaders were managers. They were managing the projects or managing the people, but they weren't actually, I'm not saying all of them, but there were very few that really understood that that's not how we need to lead. And so just over my period of this 20 years, I discovered really early on, 20 years ago, that whenever I learned something like extended disc, it was almost like a superpower. I had the ability to make people feel the conversation changed. I was able to communicate in a different way. And I thought there's got to be something to this. So no matter what I've done throughout my career, I've always layered this whole behavioral style tool in it, because at the core of it, it's all about being human and connecting in some way. And I think we're starting to get to the point now where we're realizing how important it is that we're connecting. We're seeing different results when we do.
Give me an idea of what that means in terms of different results.
I believe that when you communicate effectively, that you are way more productive as a team, not just from an individual, but as a team. And so when you have your North Star, which is your vision and your mission for that, your vision statement, your mission statement for your organization, it's kind of the North Star, why we're doing what we're doing here today. When everybody's on the same page and that's communicated properly, they are all able to row in the same direction. Everyone is looking at the same target. And if you have met them where they are, they're going to go to that frontal lobe. So they feel more like they can create in that space. And if you think about it, you hire smart people, right? You're not hiring young kids. So you're not needing to treat them like children. You're needing to try to figure out how you can empower them to be the best version of themselves. They spend most of their day with you, at your company. Most of their day is at their job. So why wouldn't you want to try to make that environment where they feel like they are able to be productive or be creative and contribute to the reason that they're there all day?
I get it. I'm totally on board, Shelley. Why this for you?
Why this for me? Well, I believe my reason for being here, my purpose is to be a bridge builder. To authentically, for me to show up is to connect people. And if anyone, knows me at all, they know that that's my ultimate goal is even if we have one conversation, I want to try to have a connection or two or three to relay on to you, on for you, so that you can continue that, as you said, continue that cycle going forward. So for me, this is just an extension of who I believe I am authentically as that bridge builder, that connector, is to just help people connect through communication. So my actual tagline for my business, Inline Consulting Services, is connect, communicate, grow. I believe that there's a direct correlation to each one of those.
I love it. And connectedness is one of my core values. It's just who I am, and I love the bridge builder concept. What happens for you when you connect people, when you build those bridges? Do you hear back, or do you not hear of some of those bridges that you've connected?
It depends on the connection. So a lot of times my connections are not directly, when you first meet someone and you introduce them to someone, you're not, in my opinion, it's very rare that you're going to come up with a client for them, right? Like for their business. But when you can authentically give them a reason why they should connect with this other person, like the people I connected you with, I make sure that and they know why I thought I saw a connection there. And so I do that with an absolute open heart of just letting it be what it is, whether it turns into something more or it doesn't. Sometimes I hear that things are amazing that come from it. Sometimes I actually hear you connected me with this person who connected me with this person, and that turned into this. And that is as actually I call it my currency. It's something that I really love, is to just know that those connections were fruitful, whether it was a business or a personal connection. It doesn't matter to me. And then sometimes it's years before I hear what those connections did. But again, it's something that I do from my gut. So I know that is what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel it in I call it divine networking. It's my divine networking gut connection that I make, where that person comes to mind out of thousands of people in my network. And I think I should connect them with you.
So sometimes you will get a feeling and you won't even know why, but you just go with it. And you'll explain that to the person you're making, or to the people you're making that connection with.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll figure out what it is when they're telling me more about their business or about who they're looking to connect with. Because one of my favorite questions is to ask them, not necessarily for a client, but who is the best connection for you as an adjacent partner? Who's that person that can run alongside you and you guys can be referral partners? Because most of the time I have someone in my network, and as you're telling me your story, it just kind of comes to me. My gut just says, I think you should connect Amy with this person. And sometimes I'll say in the connection, I'm not really sure. I just feel like I was supposed to connect you. But in most cases, I have a reason, or there's something they said that really triggered that connection.
And you spoke earlier about the energy tank being drained or having deficits and leading to burnout. Is that something that you've experienced personally?
Yes, I have. There have been different times in my life where I have, specifically when I go back to corporate jobs. So this is my third business over the years. I am finally, I think, at an age where I've realized I'm 100% autonomous. I need to work with companies, but I don't need to work for them. And that took me a while to figure out. But what happens is that, because I'm autonomous, I get into those environments and I want to create and I want to do the entrepreneur thing, but within a corporation or corporate wall. And that doesn't usually fit for them because they have very specific rules. And so when I get myself in those situations, I find that it tends to drain me because I go to that fight or flight mode, right? And I'm depleting that energy. I'm doing something that doesn't feel authentically me. And so what happens after doing that for long periods of time is that you get to burnout's as a hot topic right now, but really at the core of it, it's an exhaustion that you can't put your finger on, right? It's like You're not just mentally exhausted. You're not just physically exhausted. You're not just emotionally exhausted. You're all of those things. And you notice it when you go to do something that lights you up. So, like if you enjoy walking on the beach or you enjoy walking in a park, and you just know what that feels like whenever you do that, you feel energized. You feel like you got some additional energy from somewhere, right? That is the exact opposite of when something is depleting your energy. And you have to think about it like an energy tank, because if you are constantly pulling out of that tank and there's nothing else to pull on, I mean, eventually you just run out of steam, like you just stop, you know? And I got to a point, this happened to me after I had a total hysterectomy in 2022. You know, I was, successful in the job I was in. I wasn't necessarily happy, but I was successful and I was making good money. And you just kind of, okay, this is where I'm at right now. And then I had this radical hysterectomy. And when I woke up and I was in menopause, it kind of sent me off the cliff. I started challenging all of my belief system. All my belief system became, something that I was just really focused on. What do I believe and why do I believe it? And why am I in the place that I'm at? Just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I need to do it. And so I started reprioritizing myself at that point, because I had hit a point where I couldn't fill that void with a paycheck, right? And that became overwhelming for me. And so it took me months to figure out. I mean, I had to get the hormones under control. There were a lot of things going on, but that got me to a state for me to say, hang on a second. Why am I on the wheel? Why am I just stuck on this wheel? And I'm not really showing up authentically, and I'm not showing at the best version of me, bringing the best version of me to this world. And I mean, when you get to a certain age and people start passing away, or, you have things happen, it kind of gives you perspective. Like, I need to be authentically me every day and show up in the best way that I can.
And that word authentic and authentically has come up several times now, Shelley. And in terms of the importance that you're stressing on authentic communication, authentic being, and authentic doing in terms of what it is that you're aligning your work with because of who you are, that authenticity, was it clear when you're striking in those treads of being authentic for you?
Um, I think when you have an authentic version of you show up, it sits differently. It feels different. It feels right. It feels comfortable. I think that we've all had these moments throughout our lives where we're like, man, that really lit me up. Like that energized me, or that gave me another level of excitement that I haven't felt in a long time. And what happens when you allow yourself to be in that space specifically, you're able to expand your mind into different things. You're able to say, you're not limiting yourself to just the task that's in front of you right now. When I say it, you go to the frontal lobe and you can create. You create in every area of your life, and you do it subconsciously and consciously. So when you put yourself in that box and you're not authentically you, that creativity is stifled. You don't have the opportunity to even create, because you're not giving it the environment to do it. But when you are authentic and you're kind of, getting those sparks or those lights, things come to you that you normally would not have come to you. And so I try to get myself in that space as often as possible, because that's where I create. And I just think that's how we're designed, and we kind of have this mentality that we're supposed to grow up and go to college and get a degree and, go to work for a company. And years ago they used to have pensions, and so that meant, please stay here for your entire career so that you can, they encourage you to stay there for you to get a pension. get married, have children. Like we have this whole thing that we've put out that we're supposed to do. And when we don't feel like that's authentic for us, or if we're, maybe the entrepreneur road is not for everyone, but maybe going and doing something out of the norm for a family is something that they want to do, and if you don't show up authentically to do that, I mean, the world's missing out on the best versions of you.
And the reasons I ask you of how it feels to be authentic is because I hear many times people not feeling that they've got there and they want to know how. And so hearing you articulate it and in it feeling comfortable in a different level of excitement, and the way that you were describing the different energy levels of the walking on the beach versus the challenging work that you may be experiencing right now. You had a radical hysterectomy, which caused this catalyst, and therefore it challenged you to look at, or you challenged your beliefs. Do you feel you would be where you are now had you not had the hysterectomy and the shift in hormones and the falling off the cliff with those?
I don't know that I would have been where I'm at now. I think eventually we all know, if we really, really sit in the quiet space with ourselves, we all know that we need to go to a different level than where we're at. It's growth. That's what growth looks like, right? It's hard and it's not fun, and sometimes it's uh, looking at the things that we don't want instead of just looking for the things we do want. And so I don't know that I would have gotten there at this time period, but I think I was always meant to get here, because my job is to, voice these things so that people, I always wondered for a long time, like, why was this so hard? Why did I have to go through a 20-year marriage and get a divorce? Or why did I have to, all of these different things? Why did that have to happen? And it's interesting whenever you kind of sit in the space and realize that all of those things brought you to be who you are today, right? It's bringing you to a certain space. And I think it's because I'm supposed to help other people connect that inside of them, right? Because of that story. And you may not go through something like that, but if you allow yourself to sit in that quiet space and figure out, what is it that I really do want in life? Am I there? I don't know what it is, but opening your mind to not just doing the rat race, but opening your mind to being in maybe it is outside. Maybe that's where you get your creativity comes to you, or maybe it's working on, crocheting, or maybe it's whatever it is that sparks that inside of you. The more you do that, the more your authentic self shows up. And I feel like the more you get direction from that inner side of you, you're getting the direction. It might just have taken longer for me to get here, but I think I would have always gotten to this point.
I hear you. And it's something that I like to stress, that you don't have to experience or witness a disaster or a significant event before you can create a life of purpose. It just so happens that those who have seem to get there faster because they have been, as you said, almost forced into taking that time out, that quiet space to create this purposeful life from within. And it is something you could get to create. And I have a lot of pushback sometimes from people say, I'm not a creator. We're all
We're
creators.
all creators. Agreed. You just have to give your mind the space to do it. When we are doing all the things, like we all are busy, but we're probably busy. Like we're not like actually doing maybe the things that we should be doing, or maybe we're doing things one of the things my word for 2025 is no. And I haven't, in years past, I just used to joke and say my no button is broken. But I have, set some boundaries for myself. I love to network. I love to connect people, as we've talked about. And I would go to every networking event there is possibly on the planet, whether it's Zoom or in person. I just love it because I love being around people. It gives me that energy, that we were talking about. Um, but I need to be more intentional this year, and I need to make sure I'm not just being busy. I don't need to just have meetings on my books for just having meetings. I need to be very intentional about what it is that I'm focusing on. So, when we do that and we figure out, okay, I need to focus on these specific things and make room for them, that also has to do with your mental space. You know, how can I get myself in an environment where I time block for taking a walk in the middle of the day, because maybe that's what's going to give me enough energy to get through the rest of the afternoon instead of being depleting my energy tank and just pushing through it. That's another thing I think that we've gotten so good at is, if you think about your grandparents, they didn't do all the things that we do in a day. They had a harder life because of not having all of the, things that we do. But think about how many phone calls you do. Think about how many videos you do. Think about, you know, how many meetings you do in a week, where you drive to. I mean, there's just so many things that we're doing that are creating kind of just, they're just filling the space, but they may not be filling us, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I talk about the difference between filling in the moments as opposed to creating fulfilling moments. And you've just literally illustrated that beautifully in terms of being intentional. And these intentional choices that you've made are because you needed to have those boundaries. Otherwise, the space gets filled for sure. If you don't fill your space, others will fill it for you. So make sure you're filling it first.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's a universal law, really. If there's a void in nature, it's just natural for something to come in and fill that void. And we always think, because we think we're in control. That's another thing I learned over this last year was I'm really not in control of anything. So, other than myself. And we had another really traumatic thing happen last year where there was a hurricane that came through Florida, and we ended up with 5 feet of water in our home and lost everything. But when you have, there's perspective in all of that, right? So that was almost like an opportunity for us to have a clean slate and just, look like, okay, this is hard, but we're going to look at it as, now we have an opportunity to create in this space that, we've had a lot of that furniture most of our adult life. Now what is it that I want to have, right? Instead of looking at it like I'm a victim or this is sad or, whatever. And there's always people that had it worse than we did. So, you have to kind of look at where the opportunities are versus it being, something that was super negative.
So your no button is no longer broken. It's very much functional and you're in control of that. What is
Yeah.
it you're going to be saying yes to?
I am going to be doing more of the connecting that we were talking about. So not necessarily just having meetings, but having very intentional meetings. So I want to try to create more with people. So collaborate more. There are a lot of really, really smart people out there that I could learn from. And if you've gotten to a point where you've stopped learning or you think you've arrived, you're absolutely wrong. So I love to fill my time being around people who are smarter than I am and who have done things, and I would trade places with them. So that's what I want to do more of. I want to fill my I think I have enough energy at this stage in my life to continue to grow and build this business, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I want to talk to people who have done it and are successful, and I want to know how they did it. And instead of trying to create with just from scratch, I want to create with using other tools that other people have.
Absolutely. And my word for this year is collaboration. So here we are having this
Yeah.
conversation. And I love that because my word was collaboration. Your word is your focus is to connect and talk with other people. And we've been introduced and here we are. We've taken action after the reflection. And this is the key thing is to be intentional. It's to understand what it is you're trying to achieve and in terms of purpose, how that is of relevance. Because as you say, we could just have this conversation. It could be that we fill our diary, both of us, but no, we've been very intentional about where is this going to go? We're recording a podcast that is talking about your focus on why, the reason why you're doing what you're doing, to allow others to recognize what it is that they are or not doing currently and what it is that they would like to replace the time that their voids are being filled up with.
Absolutely. And, I think when you're looking for this or figuring out how to start, it really is as simple as what lights me up. Pay attention to what that is. Like what lights me up. When I do this, that lights me up, right? I really enjoy whenever I listen to this music, or I really enjoy whenever, I get to spend time with my grandkids, or whatever that is. Try to pay attention to that feeling because there's a feeling inside. I believe that we're, you know, spirit beings having a physical experience. And I just know that we know innately, we know inside of our being what we need to be doing. We're just not always paying attention to that. And we let the noise happen around us, right? And distract us from it. But I think one of the best ways to practice is when you feel that to be like, "Ooh, how can I do more of that? That makes me feel good. Let me do more of that." And the longer you're in that space, the more you go from that fight or flight mode, right? To that frontal lobe and start creating. It's just going to naturally happen. It's the nature of things.
Purpose and the why I see as interconnected but as separate in terms of what they do. The purpose being your overarching intention that guides your direction in life, and the why being the emotional significance that you assign to it. So, in terms of your purpose and your why, Shelley, what is it that is really at the core of the why for you? The emotional significance.
When I talk to you about that lighting you up thing, when I get that spark inside of me that says, connect Amy with this person, I have just released the fact that I don't always need to know why, but I know that my purpose is to be here and do that, to connect people, to be that bridge builder. Actually, also even to show them things that maybe they didn't see, to have a deeper understanding or a bigger picture. That's also another reason I'm here. But the why, I believe, comes from that spark. The why is like it's sparking inside of me, and I've just started to practice more so that I do it more often. And if I ever hear why I connect people, that's amazing. If I don't hear why, I know that my reason, my why is that's what I was here to be a catalyst for that. Right. And when you do know your why, you do know why you do what you do. I believe that compounds whenever I make those connections because I'm authentically being me. I'm also helping other people. This is how I serve people. And whether I'm helping them with communication or I'm, helping my adult children, figure something out, or I'm, spending time with a girlfriend or spending time with family, I know that I have a purpose there. And that purpose is to, bridge between these people, whether that's me with family or, two other people. So hopefully that answered your question. It kind of does. I understand why you separate them, but they kind of go interconnectively go back and forth within each other.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier that you call it your currency, and currency means the flow. And so therefore there is that flow that is naturally happening between the two. And so the purpose and the why connected and flowing. And it is that fruitful connection that you have between, and you mentioned your heart, you've mentioned your gut, you've talked about your mind. Again, it's that connection with all of those elements. Tell me more about the behavior analysis and how much of it comes from this connection that you have versus theory.
So I think it's a tool. I think the tool is a good place to start. It helps people engage in a conversation. So, for instance, in DISC, there are 4 different quadrants. Now, we don't isolate you into one quadrant. Most people light up in 3, 2 or 3. It's just normal. And we don't isolate you in that one style for you, to stay there forever. But what it does is it helps people to understand, right? If somebody they're talking to is more task oriented or they're more people oriented, we're getting to the quadrant so that you can open the conversation and start communicating in their language. Are they more task oriented or are they more people oriented? Are they out in the room processing or are they internal processing? If I know I've got a task oriented internal processor, when I go to ask a question, Amy, I want to make sure I give the opportunity for them to process it internally and answer it. So the sooner I can identify where we basically are on the quadrant, I can start adjusting my conversation so they feel more comfortable. If you try to force somebody who is processing internally to give you an answer immediately or to push them for something, they're going to feel they're going to go to that fight or flight mode because they're going to feel defensive. And immediately that conversation doesn't have the same breadth to it that it would have if you were allowing them to process not the way you process or the way you expect somebody to process, but the way that they need to process that conversation. When you allow for that, and you ask good questions and as opposed to just stating things, right? When you ask good questions and then allow for that to answer, or even say, hey, you don't have to let me know right now, but can you maybe let me know by this afternoon? That allows them to be able to go back and process it, right? Same with the same token with somebody who's out in the room processing. If you start and they're maybe more people centric, if you come in and you say, Amy, I've got these 3 things, and you don't say good morning and you don't ask them how they're doing, or you don't ask how their weekend was, maybe that's not important to you. But if they're more people centric, they're going to, and out in the room processing, they're probably going to want to say something about their weekend, or they're going to want to tell you about their daughter's wedding that they had over the weekend. Like you never really know until you figure out where they are on the quadrant. And you can hear in those 2 examples how drastically different that person communicates, or how they process, or how they problem solve. If you make somebody feel like they are just a number and you're just asking them to be task centric when they're more people centric, you're going to get the task done from them. Those 3 things are going to get done, but that's it. What if you had said, good morning, Amy, how was your weekend? Gave just a couple of minutes for that to open up. She goes to her frontal lobe, and now she's thinking, you know what? I could probably make this process a little better. I bet you anything I could, add this step or put this in the standard operating procedure, and that's going to help the finance division more. Now you're giving room for creativity, whereas before you were just sticking to the defensive fight or flight mode, which is only going to get done what the job requires.
And what I loved is right at the beginning of that really great explanation there was that you talked about giving some breath into the conversation, into this communication. And it makes it as though it is a living thing. And you creating this entity that is to be nurtured in the same way that you would if it was a person. So the way that you're treating your work is with that love, with that respect.
Very much so, because you're co-creating with that person. You really are. And even if you're just having a conversation about something that doesn't seem deep, or doesn't seem like it's got a lot of, depth to it, you're building on a relationship that eventually could turn into other creativity down the road. If somebody feels like every time they're with you, you understand them, they feel comfortable, they want to tell you things, they, want to share about their personal life, that opens a different level inside of that creativity inside of them that they bring to the table that would not have been there. So when you talk about breathing life into a conversation, it's really about continuing to build a foundation with the individual that you're talking to, so that when when the rubber meets the road and you do need to do something, they'll show up and they'll do it at the best of their ability, because you have championed a communication with them that they feel safe with you, or they feel like they can be themselves. And when it's time to really, when it's time to hit go and it's a go time, they're going to show up in a bigger way for you. And this is why I work with leaders, because I feel like they, a lot of times business owners too, they work in their business, they work on their business, they get like all these different hats, they've got the plates spinning. And sometimes they forget that their most expensive asset, but their biggest asset to their company is their people. Right. And so if that's constantly churning, you're having to start from scratch. You're not building anything. You're literally just redoing all of the work that you started in the beginning when they first came in. Don't you want to get more out of that role and that person than just the basic level of what they're doing?
I hear you. And I could have this conversation and build on it and reflect on all sorts of areas for much, much longer than we have now, Shelley. So what I would love you to do is, I'm going to put them in the show notes, but how would someone want to reach out and connect with you? What's the best way to do that?
They can find my website is shellystarks.com. There is a form on there they can reach out. On my LinkedIn page is also another really good place to connect with me. My contact information is in the contact button on LinkedIn. And, if there is somebody that is looking to, learn more about how to communicate better, I always love having at least a discovery conversation to see if it's a good fit. But also, if you're just a connector or a super connector, I love connecting with those people as well.
Amazing. Well, all in the show notes. So thank you. Shelley, thank you for sharing why you do what you do. It really has been a beautiful conversation. Do you have some final words, please?
Sure. I believe that we all need to figure out that authentic piece of us and figure out what lights us up. And so I would encourage you to, go find that, go find what that feeling is. And when you find it, sit and pay attention to it so that you know what that feels like and you can duplicate it. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but when you recognize it, once you start paying attention to it, that's an inner being thing that's going to start saying, hey, don't you know, this is something that makes us feel good. Let's do more of that. We're filled with a world that has so much negativity everywhere and so much division. You got to find that inner peace. You got to find it inside of you first before you can give it out to the world. So take some time for you to find that.
This episode's over, but let's keep the conversation going. How has this episode impacted you? Share your insights, takeaways, and reflections with actions on social media, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback creates powerful ripple effects, helping others to discover its value. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for links on how to work with me, where to buy my new book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and where to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.